So with that reading, let's give our attention to our brother Nathan this morning. Again, his title is New Beginnings. Brother Nathan.
Welcome, or at least thank you for welcoming us back. So can you guys hear me fine with the mask on? Yeah. All right, then we will go with that. Yeah, so it's great to be back. I know everybody in this room, but may not know everyone watching online. So my name is Nathan Richard. I grew up in the Chicagoland area from birth until 2015. That's when I married Abigail. Abigail grew up in Ohio. We moved downstate to central Illinois for a couple years, and then moved out west to Washington State in Portland, Oregon, from 2017 until 2 weeks ago. So we have 2 kids. Joanna's over there, as well as Kaya. Yeah, I said your name. So we're excited to be back. I know personally, I'm very excited to be back. Our whole family is excited to be in Illinois. It's sad to leave the West. We very, very much enjoyed our time out in Portland, but at the same time, nothing beats coming home. Coming both home to our natural family as well as to our spiritual family. So maybe Portland will be happy that I'm no longer saying, hey, well, in Chicago we should do this, or in Chicago we got to figure it out when we do this. No more saying that to bug people, but we are very excited to be back home. So today we'll talk about new beginnings, which is perhaps a natural thought as we've moved across the country. Didn't even realize or didn't make the connection that it's the Jewish New Year, because this actually works quite well. So a fortunate coincidence. And so for our family, there's a bunch of obvious new beginnings in our life. So there's a new place to live, a new part of the country. There's also a new job. There's a new church. There's new neighbors. There's new friends, new people we will spend time with, new property, new house. There's a lot of new beginnings going on in our life. I would argue that it's a good thing. It's a positive thing to have new beginnings. It's easy to fall into a rut, to fall into a pattern, a routine. You're stuck in your everyday life, and it's good to have new things to look forward to. Now, I don't think that moving across the country is something we should do every 6 months or something like that. But starting new things, it undeniably creates excitement, it creates enthusiasm, right? There's some momentum that comes when you start something new. Right? So think about that feeling you get in whatever your interests are. If you're starting a new house project, if you're opening a new book, if you're joining a new sport or something like that, there's excitement. And there's a little bit of pep in your step. We're going to do this thing, and no one goes into something new with, well, that's not true. It's rare to go into something new really dreading it, right? Typically that's because we're pushed into it. But if we're making a choice, we're choosing to do something, it's pretty exciting. At the same time, the little caveat will be when you are starting things new, we do want to be a little bit careful and measure out how that's going to go. One easy dilemma or drawback would be you're the person who has a house, let's say, with 30 unfinished projects, right? You start tearing down a wall, we'll get to that later. Then you go to this room, you take out the toilet, we'll get to that later. And then you go take out the cabinets, and we'll do that later. So it's not exactly what we want to be doing. Jesus actually talks about that in Luke chapter 14. In Luke 14, starting at verse 28, Jesus says, "For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who observe it begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.'" So we don't want to do that. We don't want to start things and hop from new initiative to new initiative. But at the same time, if we don't start anything, we're never going to finish anything. And the life of a disciple of Christ is an active life. We're not called to sit around in our back seat and be passive, just reacting as life passes us by. No, it's about doing things. It's about taking actions, making mistakes, putting ourselves out there in service of Jesus. And what's interesting is in this current climate, sooner or probably later, this COVID climate will end. Maybe 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, no idea when. But sooner or probably a lot later, life will get back to normal, or at least we hope. And it seems like for the last, 6 months since going back to March when all the quarantine started, at least for me, for the first several months, it felt like we were in a holding period in life. I was home. We were home for like 4 straight weeks, just didn't do a thing. And when you don't do a thing, you feel like you're not doing a thing. Everything's on hold. Hey, we had all these plans, all these, travel things, and we're going to accomplish that. Everything stopped. Just flat out stopped. But once life starts to get a little bit back to normal, and we're taking baby steps right now, we have an opportunity to think about our lives in a sense of a new beginning. Do we want our life in a post-COVID world to be the same as our life in a pre-COVID world? Do we want our lives 2 years from now to look the same as our life did 1 year ago? Maybe yes, maybe no. But I do think that now is a great time to consider and make intentional choices about what we want our life to look at. We have a whole bunch of time to sit and reflect, and now is a good time to think, all right, what is a direction that we want our life to go? So that's kind of the overall thoughts. And then personally, I'm excited because there's a new beginning that I'm starting, and that would be a study on prayer. So it's been percolating in my mind for honestly years. And it's kind of funny because some new beginnings start planned out for years and others are more spontaneous. So I'm sure you're thinking about in the classical music world, you have different types of pieces. You have a Schubert Impromptu, which was composed in a couple of weeks, and you have a Brahms Symphony, which took 20 years to compose. Output are both wonderful pieces of music, but the time it took to start this new beginning can vary drastically. And it's the same way in our life. We could plan out a various project, spend years planning it out, or we could get up one day and say, we're going to stop smoking, and boom, just change, or whatever it is. Of course, hopefully all new beginnings are aligned with God's vision. As Proverbs says, where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained, but happy is he who keeps the law. And I think when it comes to myself in prayer, a very common saying, if someone asks you, hey, how's your prayer life? What are your thoughts on prayer? Well, it's a very typical answer to say, it's a journey, right? My views on prayer and my own prayer life, it's been a journey. And I think for myself, if I was being honest, I would say that the journey hasn't really started yet. So I've said prayers my whole life, but I would say I never really thought about the notion of prayer or what it really means. So yeah, I make lists of what I'm thankful for, maybe some things I want to be different, but that's all just shaped around when I grew up. I mean, my prayers more or less mimic whatever we prayed at dinner or breakfast time at home. I never really stepped back and said, hey, what is prayer? What is my goal here when I'm sitting down and talking to God? And so over the past few years, I've been trying to grapple with this kind of interplay between God's will and our will, thinking about free will, thinking about the thought of changing God's mind. Is that something that prayer is part of? What is the purpose of prayer? Does prayer matter? What's the point? What's the intended outcome of prayer? What do we want to gain out of it? Is it even about us? Is it all about God? Is it about Jesus? I don't know. I really don't know. And prayer is a very personal subject. So as I'm saying this, most of you have strong opinions about prayer because it's something that we interact with on a daily basis. So we have strong opinions, we would say existing schemas in place. And so did I. I had this kind of default, right? Could happily go through life with praying the way I'm praying, teaching my girls how to pray the way I was taught and the way they were taught and all the way back. But I don't know if that's fully right? Because for myself, my thoughts on prayer weren't from an actual Bible study. It was just more, hey, you pick up things here and there, I'm listening, I'm experiencing different things. It's not an actual study on what prayer is. And so I'm excited. One of my big new beginnings for the next year or whatever is to sit down and do a study on prayer. And so here's an example of kind of the things that I'm thinking about. So here's a good litmus test. And so I'm excited about this question because there's no obvious answer. It's still new enough where there's no accepted default answer, and you can easily make an argument both ways. So here's the question. Do you think that we should pray to God for God to remove the COVID-19 pandemic? Should we pray to God to get rid of all instances of the COVID virus? Yeah. What do you think? I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. Yeah. Think about that question. Is it okay to pray to God to remove the COVID-19 pandemic? Or maybe to say, is it okay, is different than saying, should we? So I think the most common answer is to pray, God, please alleviate the pandemic if it's according to your will. Very common thing to say. I really dislike that answer. I think it's a complete cop-out. It's saying, God, if you want to do something, go ahead and do it. And that doesn't make sense to me. Does God need my permission to do something that he wants to do? Dear God, please do what you want to do. Thank you. I don't buy that. I really don't. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think God needs my permission to act one way or another. But this is a spectrum, right? Because I think most of us would be very comfortable praying for a specific individual. If someone contracted the virus, I think most of us would say, God, please heal this person. Or please help in this situation, ease their suffering, whatever it is. So how about some other things on the spectrum? Would you feel comfortable asking God to stop the current forest fires and the impact of the fires out west? Would you be comfortable asking God to stop all forest fires, or at least all destructive or the negative consequences of forest fires? Would you be okay praying to God to help someone find a new job? Would you be okay praying to God asking for a promotion, or asking to improve your working conditions, or changing something about your boss or your coworkers? How about praying to God to help us win the lottery? How about praying to God to ask for a sign to prove that he's there, to prove that he's listening? How about praying to God to help the Bears win the Super Bowl? How about praying to God to ask for a specific presidential candidate to win? How about praying to God to ask for a certain policy impacting millions of people negatively to change? Perhaps more importantly, how do we know that we're not just talking to ourselves when we pray? How do we know it actually makes a difference? So there's a bunch of different questions. What makes these questions different from one another? I think instinctively we feel that some of these are okay and good things to pray for, and instinctively we feel that some of these are not things that we would advise others around us to pray for. Why do we feel that way? What's actually making these different? What are the differences in that where we're okay praying for some things, but not okay praying for others? So some of the broader questions I have, and today we're going to dwell in the question area. We're going to spend our time in the question and in the doubt. Is it okay to ask God to intervene? Won't his will always prevail anyway? So we read the Lord's Prayer, and there's an inherent conflict between give us our daily bread and thy will be done. Both those two things are in the Lord's Prayer. Give us our daily bread and thy will be done. But there's a conflict in there. It's asking for what we want versus accepting what God gives us. Does God already know what we're going to ask for? He knows our thoughts. So if he already knows what's going on in our head, what's the point of prayer? Is it actually doing anything to sit down and think, hey, this is an address to God, or we're thinking through Jesus or something like that? Does it matter? Is prayer like a vending machine or an ATM where we ask God for X and he immediately gives us Y? I think most of us would say no, but isn't that true to an extent? Ask and you shall receive. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Isn't there a semblance of truth? What is that? What does that look like? Are there qualifications to God answering prayer? There's a bunch of verses on this. I'll just say the verses, and since it's recorded, you can go back and look at them if you want. Matthew 21:22, Mark 11:22 to 26, 1 John 3:22, Isaiah 1:15, Acts 4:24 to 31, Ezekiel 14:1 to 8. I'll say it one more time. See, if I was on Zoom, I would type them all in right there. That's kind of fun to do. Matthew 21:22, Mark 11:22 to 26, 1 John 3:22, Isaiah 1:15, Acts 4:24 to 31, Ezekiel 14:1 to 8, and there's a bunch of other ones. Right? These are all examples of God not answering prayer for a specific reason, or saying, hey, in order for me to hear your prayer, you need something. You need faith. You need to obey my commandments. And once that happens, then I will answer your prayer. Are there qualifications? Are there times when God says he won't hear our prayer? How about intercession? Intercession is a little bit different than changing God's mind because it's asking for other people. So I, Nathan, am praying to God to intervene on behalf of someone else. James 5:16 says, therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. The effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much. So we think about things like when Moses came down from Mount Sinai and the children of Israel were worshiping this golden calf, this idol. And God wanted to destroy all of Israel. And Moses intervenes. He has a prayer of intercession and he says, God, please do not. Please spare the people. What if we're praying for someone who doesn't want that outcome? What if we say, God, please bring this person to Christ. Help them to have a relationship with Jesus. What if that person doesn't want to know Jesus? Or similarly, look at 1 John chapter 5. Right? Are there rules around what we can pray? First John chapter 5, verses 16 to 17. If anyone sees his brother committing a sin not leading to death, he shall ask, and God will he shall ask, and God will for him give life to those who are committing sin not leading to death. There is a sin leading to death. I do not say that he should make request for this. All unrighteousness is sin, and there is a sin not leading to death. All right, so there's a mystery sin here that we can't pray for, apparently. That doesn't make sense to me. What's going on? Are we not supposed to pray for some things? Are we not supposed to pray for some people? Why is it that we're comfortable asking God for easy things? Why can we say, God, please give us safe travel? That's a very, very easy prayer, and it makes us feel happy. Because then when we arrive at someplace safely, as there's a 99.9% chance that we will, we feel good that God has kept us safe. But at the same time, are we as comfortable saying, God, please save my failing marriage? Or God, do this impossible miracle that just doesn't seem possible at all. Intervene in a life. Or if we are going to pray for a big thing, don't we often wait until the last minute? That's atheist in a foxhole situation. What makes us default towards asking easy prayers instead of asking God for harder things? The last one, how about the question that God poses to Solomon? In 1 Kings chapter 3, God says to Solomon, ask for you, wish, I wrote it down wrong. Let's just flip there. 1 Kings 3:5. Ask what you wish me to give you. Ask what you wish me to give you. I don't have an answer to that. If God came to me and said, Nathan, what do you want? I don't have an answer off the top of my head. I don't even have an answer halfway down my head. I don't know what I would say to that. And isn't that what prayer is? It's asking God what we want. So now what's interesting is you think of a Bible study or an exhortation or a class, and the point is to have answers to this. No one comes up and says, hey, here's a bunch of things that don't make sense, see ya. But that's not how life works, and that's the presider's job to give all the answers. So that will be good there. But today is about new beginnings, because not everything in life is 100% complete. Life isn't wrapped up in a pretty little bow with all the answers. It's not black and white, where I ask X, the answer is Y, we're all good. We're not in a world of Sunday school answers and Sunday school questions. It was great to have that. Remember that yellow instructor book? I think the Goulds brought it over or something like that. You had a question, what is the meaning of life? And there was an answer. It was great. It would be fantastic if we had these 120 questions about life and there's just an answer in the yellow book. They are in the book, but it's not quite as easy as question, answer. Memorize the answer and you get 2 points. It's not quite like that. In fact, it's oftentimes the opposite. And I think it's okay to dwell in that uncertainty and revel in the beginning, in a beginning phase. Hopefully, in a year or two, I have more than just questions about prayer. That's the goal. And I pray that I do have more than just those questions. But doubt never goes away in life. Pain and suffering don't go away. We don't always have the answer. And oftentimes it feels like we're just at the beginning of the journey. That's how life is. Baptism's the same way. We're not baptized when we have the answers to everything, when we memorize those little, answer booklets. No. Baptism is a commitment to starting. It's a commitment to a new beginning. One of the best things about new beginning is that you truly can start at any time. Be it the Jewish New Year, be it the American New Year, be it a life change, moving from Portland to Illinois, having a baby, getting married, graduating. But for now, we focus on the emblems. And it's such a unique time where we get 5 to 10 minutes every week to focus entirely on Jesus. To focus on Jesus, his prayer life with his Father. Think of Jesus and his growth, the transitions in his life, the changes and the new beginnings. And we have 5 to 10 minutes to focus on ourselves. To ask questions, are we where we want to be? What new thing do we want to start? How can we make today the day for a new beginning?